It's no secret that the Ender Dragon is one of the worst bosses in gaming history. It's not fun, not hard, and most importantly, just straight up boring. So today I took it upon myself to do what Mojang has refused to do: fix the Ender Dragon. But to fix the Ender Dragon, we first need to understand two things. Why is the Ender Dragon such a bad boss, and what actually makes a good boss? Let's first start by figuring out what actually makes a good boss fight. Then we can be overly negative and pick apart the Ender Dragon pixel by pixel, because I don't touch grass and have way too much time on my hands. Anyways, what makes a good boss? Well, after hours and hours of research, I've narrowed it down to 5 different factors: motivation, length, difficulty, atmosphere, and music. Motivation is important because without motivation, what reason do you have to fight the boss? Not really any, because you don't have any motivation. Secondarily, having motivation means that when you do finally kill that boss, it feels that much more rewarding. The first example that comes to mind for me when I think of a motivated boss fight is the boss fight from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, one of my favorite games. While the story of Breath of the Wild isn't that deep, you still do have a reason to kill the final boss. The length of a boss fight is incredibly important. If it's too short, it'll feel disappointing. I mean, the entire game has been building up until this point, and then you kill the boss in like 5 minutes. That's not a great boss fight. But if it's too long, on the other hand, it'll be really frustrating. Yeah, the entire game has been building up to this, but if I can't defeat the boss, there's not really a point in having a boss. Secondarily, if I die during an overly long boss fight, there's a good chance that I'll end up quitting the boss fight. Because 1, I've just been demotivated, and 2, I have a really short attention span, so there's a good chance that would play a factor as well. Just like length, the difficulty of a boss fight needs to be just right. If it's too easy, it's going to be really disappointing. There's nothing worse than walking into a boss fight and it being easier than the mini boss fights you've been experiencing throughout the entire game. But if it's too hard, on the other hand, it's going to be really frustrating. 1, because it's too hard, and 2, because you're bad at the video game. Atmosphere is important because not only does it help to set the mood of the boss fight, which makes the boss fight that much more interesting, but it also helps to develop the boss as a character in the story. Music. Some of the most iconic tracks of music have come from boss fights in video games. Megalovania from Undertale, Hornet's Theme from Hollow Knight, Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. These are all songs that every gamer has heard at least once, and they're the signature of the boss fight, which is why they are really important. They help with atmosphere, they help to build out the boss fight, they help to set the scene of the boss fight, and let's be honest, a boss fight isn't really a boss fight without an awesome piece of music playing in the background. Music and boss fights are like bread and butter. Except you can't eat music in boss fights, but you get what I'm saying. Now here's a question. Do you notice one thing in common with all of these factors that make a boss fight good, aside from the fact that they make a boss fight good? Yeah, that's right. The Ender Dragon does none of these well. It has 0 motivation. It's literally just a dragon. It's way too short, which is probably because it's way too easy. The atmosphere is non-existent. All we have is a nuclear wasteland called The End, some obsidian pillars, and, well, a dragon. And the music isn't even noticeable. I'm not sure if I'd even count the Ender Dragon as a boss fight. More of a sad excuse for one. Now, how do we fix it? Well, first, motivation. Maybe that's just some basic lore or a loose story, but it needs something. I know it's kind of hard to work into a sandbox game, but if you complete Minecraft, you'll actually see that there is a sort of text scroll that does sort of outline a vague story to the game. It's not much, but even just something like that would be enough to motivate the Ender Dragon boss fight. Now, as for length and difficulty, since they sort of go hand in hand, I only really need to answer one question. A longer and more difficult boss fight could be achieved by adding more stages, making the Ender Dragon's health higher. Now, as for atmosphere, this could be improved in many ways. My personal vote is for an end revamp. This could tie into lore, make the end more interesting, and just improve it all around. Music. The music is actually pretty simple to fix. It just needs to be better, more noticeable, and boss fight worthy. Considering the Ender Dragon is the boss fight of the biggest game on the planet, it needs a killer soundtrack. Now, as much as I'd love to recode the Ender Dragon and fix all of these problems with it, I don't really know how to code well enough to do that. You know what I do know how to do though? Cheat. I mean, well, no, not cheat. It's like, it's whatever. My point is, I know how to use command blocks well enough that in vanilla Minecraft, I can edit the stats of the Ender Dragon and hopefully improve the fight by doing so. If the fight is more fun after that, then my claims aren't baseless, and you should subscribe. If it isn't, well, then I'm a liar, and you shouldn't trust me.
As if you should have before.
So anyways, let's go into the end and... oh, wait, there's already a living dragon here. Well, actually, that's good. If we kill him, we can compare that fight to the new improved one later and see which one's better. Alright, there, we killed him. Pretty plain and boring, as usual. Now let's respawn him, change his stats, and see what happens. Now that I've given him more health, time to take it all away. And that still sucked. It turns out, to no one's surprise, that just giving the Ender Dragon more health is not enough. If the Ender Dragon is going to be a fun boss, we need to fix all of those factors I talked about earlier. So if either a good mod developer or Mojang are watching this, please help. Minecraft really needs a good boss.